Hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Great.
I'm so glad to be here with you.
Good. Lisa, it's so wonderful to have you in Las Vegas.
Oh, thank you, Claytee.
So, it's my job to relax the person that I'm about to interview. So, when you're from Louisiana, I expect everybody to be just this great cook. So tell me, so tell me about all these great dishes that you cook.
Well, when I'm the youngest by about 12 years in my family. So as we were doing all the big meals and such, everyone always said things like, let Lisa make the salad. So I didn't always have the opportunity to make all the exciting Louisiana meals. I did graduate to desserts in more recent days.
Good.
But I think I'll let the older family members or the other family members make the Louisiana specialties. And my daughter and I try for the more maybe international dishes, the Mexican and the Chinese and the hot pots and ramen and things of that sort.
Okay.
So I can show you where to eat.
Okay, good.
But I might not cook for you.
Okay, so we're here today to talk about education and blacks in education and black students and all of that. So how do you feel about the way that you grew up in education, the way you learned to speak?
Well, I think every child does a monumental task of learning to speak, and they learn to speak as their parents speak and their communities speak, and that is a miracle. That's a miracle that every child learns his or her mother tongue. Sometimes the mother tongue of the parents is different from the mother tongue of the school. And that's where the school begins to think that somehow they're wrong. They are totally not wrong. They are speaking a perfectly good language that they learned in a remarkable way. There's nothing deficient about their language. What the school's role should be is to indicate that their language is wonderful the way it is, but teach them another code. If you went to France, English is a wonderful language, but you would also want to be able to learn French in order to be able to function. And so I think that's the approach that the schools need to take, not one that says in any way, shape, or form that the children's language is less than.
Wonderful. Thank you for saying that. How was college approached in your home? Did you know all along that you were going to go to college?
I suppose I did, but it wasn't. It was just because I was one of those little sort of smart brats or who did well in school. I mean, my dad received a 7th grade education formally, and he later went back and took the what's it called?
GED?
GED. I always forget that. I want to call it GRE. Took the GED, and but some people said he cheated. But in any case, he did get it. He also was an entrepreneur. He had a business, Chicken Shack, Delpit's Chicken Shack, which is now a franchise. And he was very successful in that. And so my model was not necessarily that you needed to go to college in order to be successful. It's just that was the only thing I knew how to do, was to be good in school.
Okay.
So I was good in school. My mom had not finished college. She was brilliant, my mother. And when she was pregnant with me, my father had told her, if you want to go back to school, I'll send you, but you have to have another baby for me to play with while you're gone. So he did, she did, and that's why I came 12 years later. And she went and finished her degree and got an undergrad and then got a master's in mathematics education.
Wow.
Yeah, she was brilliant.
So, and I think that you're brilliant as well, because
thank you.
I am talking to a MacArthur genius. So tell me about that. What happened that day that you got the phone call?
Well, it was sort of a bittersweet day, Claytee. First of all, I was working at Morgan State University, which is a historically black institution, consistently under financed. And so once again, the computers weren't working, so I was working at home. And the phone rang, and I was annoyed because I was trying to do something. I said, "What is it?" I thought it was somebody from the office. And the person on the other end said that they were from the MacArthur Foundation, and they were pleased to be able to tell me that I had been awarded a MacArthur Fellowship. And of course, I said nothing. And they're like, "Are you there?" I said, "Uh-huh." So I think after that, after I went to, it kind of sank in, and I told a couple of people about it. A friend came in town, and she was going to have a few people over to the house, and we went to get some food. And when we were there, a gentleman, a homeless guy with a really bad stutter, came up to us and asked for some money. And I told him, she told him, we'll buy you some food. So we went into the restaurant with takeout food, and we bought him some food, and he was very thankful and said, thank you so much. And then as we were leaving with our food, he came up to me, and he had a little plastic barrette that he had found. He said, "Do you have a daughter?" And I said, "Yeah, I do, as a matter of fact." He said, "I just wanted to give you something to thank you so much for getting me that food. I just couldn't take it without giving you something." Mm. And I started crying and did not stop for about a week. Wow. Because it was like, what did I do to deserve this when there were people who were in the straits that this gentleman was, and we are all equally deserving. Mm-hmm. So it took a long time for me to even get to the place of feeling that it was okay to have it. I went through a period of feeling that I had to say yes to everything because I owed everybody, and I almost drove myself crazy trying to do that. But it took a while to normalize it. I don't believe that any of us are more worthy than others of us, so it was a challenge.
Okay. So how many books now have you written?
Oh,
you don't keep track?
I don't.
Oh, wow.
Let me see. 1, 2. Can I give you approximate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe about 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Something like that.
Okay, great. So, and this visit to Las Vegas, you're really talking about someone else's book more than you're talking about your own.
Yep, because I love finding new information. Okay. Any information I wrote about, I already know.
Okay. So let's talk about that young man's book.
Yes.
Jarvis
Givens. Yes.
Has written a book that is just simply amazing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you got to take a look at it.
Yes. So tell me about fugitive pedagogy.
Right.
What impressed you most?
Well, the full title of the book is Fugitive Pedagogy, Black Teaching, Carter G. Woodson and the Art of Black Teaching.
Yes.
And I had always been enamored with Carter G. Woodson because he wrote the book, The Miseducation of the Negro.
That's correct.
And I think it is just as pertinent now as it was when he wrote it in the 1930s. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know that much of his history. And Jarvis has written about his history, but he's putting it in the context of the role that Carter G. Woodson had in the education for teachers.
Yes.
And Jarvis puts it as fugitive pedagogy is what black teachers always had to do in order to educate black children.
So tell me what fugitive pedagogy is and some examples.
Well, he talks about the whole role of the notion of a fugitive.
Yes.
Actually, the teachers I work with, I'll tell you about that in a minute, but he says that we have never been able to teach what we know will educate black children because we've been in systems that were antagonistic to the kinds of things that needed to be taught. So one of the stories he gives is of a teacher, Miss McGee, Tessa McGee, who had a book, who would, in her classroom, she would have a book on her lap, and she would be reading Carter G. Woodson's work about the history of black people and all of the wonderful things that black people had done. But when the principal would come in, she had the standard book for the curriculum that was required on her desk, and she would just put her eyes up to the standard curriculum and act as if that's what she had been teaching the whole time. So she had to act as a fugitive in order to be able to teach what she knew needed to be taught. And that he suggests, Jarvis and Carter G., that through all of the years that black teachers who wanted to change what happens for black children have taught that they've had to do that. And you had to figure out how to do it and not get fired. So you were always negotiating these two phenomena. And I had made a decision that I personally, a lot of my research has been about what needs to be taught, how we need to teach black children.
Yes.
And when I read Jarvis's book, and he is also a young friend of mine, when I read the book, I said, my God, people have been doing this for forever. They know what black children need to be taught. And in my lifetime, folk have school districts have called black scholars in, asked them to speak about what needs to be taught, spent lots of money buying their books for their faculty, and nothing has changed. None of those have been incorporated. So I believe none of those ideas, that we are still in a state of having to engage in fugitive pedagogy. And I also feel that I personally am not going to do any more research on what works for black children because it's already out there. I can look, I've started looking through some of my older, even the conference things, and in 1995, there's this list of the kinds of things we need to do. In 2001, there are these lists. In 2015, we know, and it hasn't been done. So it hasn't been taken on by the school systems. So I believe what we have to do is that individual teachers who are willing to engage in this kind of fugitive pedagogy have to utilize this information and incorporate it into what they're teaching without getting fired. And I think that's what I want to help them do.
So we still have to play that game in order to teach black children.
And not just black children, all marginalized children.
Yes.
Latinx children,
Yes.
I mean, some groups of Asian children even.
Native American children.
Native American
Yes.
children for sure, because
Yes.
I've worked in Native American communities. And those, we cannot rely on those who and systems that are oppressing us to teach us what we need to know.
So what does that classroom look like?
Well, some of the things, and there's certainly a lot, but some of the things in terms of African American children is what Wade Boykin calls verve. We have to have verve, which is a kind of energy, creativity, excitement. We can't just have, okay, everybody fill in, open your books, look at number if we want them to succeed.
Yes.
We have to know how to build relationships that Geneva Gay says black children and other children of color, I might add, aren't successful and don't do work or don't learn from a teacher, but they learn for a teacher.
Yes.
And so many times you'll hear children say to a teacher, "Oh, I did your homework, Miss Smith. I did your homework, Miss Smith."
and describe that teacher that students will do that work for.
Well, I refer to them as warm demanders.
Yes.
Where they are warm and connected to the kids, but they also are demanding excellence from them. They will yell at them, but they'll say things like, and that's why I've always told principals, you have to listen to what's being yelled at the kid. There are those who yell at kids and talk about how terrible they are, they'll never learn, they'll never be anything, et cetera, and there's you can hear a lot of that. But there's also teachers who yell and say, "You are too smart to be giving me this kind of work. Don't you know that you are brilliant? Okay. What is wrong with you, boy? You get there and do that work because I know you can." So that's one of the things that I think that teacher looks like.
So if a teacher knows how to teach and is not teaching in the classrooms of students of color, why? Why isn't that teacher teaching?
Do you mean why isn't she in a school with children of color, or why is she in the school and not teaching?
I want to know, if there are students in front of you, why don't you teach them if you know how to teach?
Well, many of the teachers don't know how to teach specifically for black kids. I mean, what they do is they try, and sometimes that's even black teachers, because they've been educated by the same systems nowadays.
Yes.
At one point, they were educated in historically black institutions, so that made a difference as to how they approached it. But now the teachers tend to be educated in the same institutions.
Yes.
Now, some of the teachers carry with them knowledge from their own childhoods and knowledge, black teachers or any teachers, or knowledge from their own experiences that will let them know what it is that they have a sense of what they should do. Other teachers, black, white, whatever, are trusting the state to tell them what to do, and if they're unsuccessful, they tend to believe that they doubt themselves and say they're not teaching it well enough. And so they double down on what they've been doing, and we all have heard that what marks a crazy person is continue to do the same thing and assuming that you'll get a different result. So I think that is the case in some instances. In other instances, you have teachers who don't care in the same way about the children. They don't feel that these children are theirs. They feel a distance, that they think about those children as opposed to my children. And the country, the society, it's not just the teacher's fault. I think we've been pushed into that by a lot of what exists in this country and the attitudes and belief systems about black people.
Yeah. And so our children are suffering.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of those systemic beliefs.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
So, Frederick Douglass, I just like the way that Givens talks through his introduction to this book to introduce all of the things that he talks about.
Carter G. Woodson?
No, I was talking.
Frederick Douglass, okay.
Okay, so he at the beginning of Fugitive Pedagogy, there is a statement made by Frederick Douglass's master. A slave learning to read and write was a slave running away with himself. That to me was so powerful. Can you talk about what he meant by that?
Well, I can speculate, just as you have, that he's saying that once you have that independence to be able to read and write and to develop your own thoughts, then you have a self to run away with. You have created ideas and opinions. Now, I will add, I understand what I mean, and I think he's right. But I think it's also the case that, you know, people don't have to be formally educated in order to have opinions and to be knowledgeable. But once you have that knowledge, you will not allow yourself to be able to adopt the beliefs of somebody who may be oppressing you.
Yeah, exactly. So, and he talks about something else that is really something that I'm very curious about. At one time when I was growing up, people talked about how education was this bridge that could free you. So do you think that we still look at education as a bridge today to freedom?
Well, I think it's complicated on several levels. One level is so much of education, the way it's currently designed, puts certain people down. It doesn't allow them to know who they really are. It doesn't present them with their history of brilliance, their cultural legacy. Within the context of the education system itself, it implies, even if it's by absence of mention, that people who look like them did nothing that was important. So if that's the kind of education, the only kind of education you've been exposed to, that's not going to get you to freedom, which is why those teachers and Miss McGee was reading about the real history. And so we need to make sure that gets to be included not only in the school curriculum, K-12, but our teachers don't know it because they've been to colleges now where nothing of this, they get very little knowledge.
So how are you teaching those teachers now?
They, for the most part, are learning, not in every institution, but for the most part, they are learning the traditional history, traditional psychology, traditional music, unless they choose to take a course, a separate course. But none of that happens within colleges of education because colleges of education only teach, they don't teach history. You know, you get that in the history department. And so if the history department is problematic, then the teachers won't get it, or the psychology or the music or the art, whatever. Depends on who's teaching there. So, then the kids certainly can't.
So what is the solution? What are we going to do? Schools here in Clark County, what are we going to do?
Well, first of all, I would never try to say what anybody else should do.
Okay.
But I would,
hypothetically,
yes, I would say that conversations need to be had to look at which children are not faring well. And if they happen to be children of color, which I suspect they will be, then we need to look at, well, why is that? Are the children being educated about the brilliance of whatever their ancestry is and their true history? Are their relationships being built? Because we know that that's very strong, certainly in Latinx and Native American too, although it shows differently in Native American communities, or at least what you do is different. Are they for African American children and probably for Latinx kids as well? Are they using rhythm and recitation? Are they? I mean, there are a lot of things again that we can pull from that have already been researched that we can institute. In terms of our students meaning the teachers now who are getting teacher education, I think I think the university has to look at what kind of information is required for the diverse communities that we all live in and some of us will teach in, and to make sure that that gets incorporated, that you hire the faculty and that you oversee the coursework to make sure that those elements are included in university classes.
So we have about 2 minutes left, and I want to mention a name. I don't know if you realized this as you were reading the book. You ran across the name Fred Moten. Jarvis Givens credits him with some of this thinking that he uses as in the fugitive pedagogy. He grew up in Las Vegas.
Wow.
Fred Moten's mother was one of our elementary school teachers here, Bernice Moten. And she raised Fred, who is now at one of the big universities in New York, writing books and talking about teaching and all kinds of things. So we're in a place where we have this wonderful foundation. One of the other Black teachers who taught along with Bernice Moten was one of the teachers, first teacher hired Black teacher in the school district. We now have a school named for her. And I have a feeling that this fugitive pedagogy was being used here early on in our school system.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I mean, I don't know the history, but any Black teachers who were being successful were using it.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate this so much.
I've enjoyed it so much, Claytee. Thank you.
Thank you so much.